This computer. Awesome. Oh, Anne, thank you. Sorry, it's been a bit of a faff. I clearly can still make this more complicated than it needs to be. And for those of you who've tuned in previous ones, you know I've had different issues every time. I'm sure I'm going to run out of them, and we'll be a master before we're done.
Not a problem.
So, Anne, welcome. So grateful that you were able to make this half an hour. So we'll run a bit over if that's okay. To talk about mindset and the work that you do with businesses and how scaling can make difference to the way that we have to think. And it's interesting because I only found out, you know, that there are different mindsets for depending on where you are in the whole business phase. Who knew? I mean, it makes sense. I just had never really thought about it. So I'm really looking forward to finding out some more from you.
Thank you.
So I think the first thing, you know, is, you know, for those who are just starting out, what sort of mindset challenges do business owners face?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kim. Thanks for the opportunity to kind of talk to you and your audience about this. And certainly I'm going to draw on my sort of 10, 15 years of experience of working with the SME market. And just to put some context around it, so I primarily work with service-based businesses, those that are selling services as opposed to product. So that would be 80% of my client base. And certainly what I want to share is what I've learned along the way and how I need to adapt my services to wherever they are at their business kind of stage. So great question. You know, in terms of you know, people starting out, most people sort of that I work with particularly have probably come very similar route to me, probably had some kind of corporate career and built up a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of confidence in their area of expertise. And that's the driver very often for them setting up themselves. So if you think of maybe an IT software company or maybe a HR company, even digital marketing, and these are people who are incredibly experienced at what they do. And then they make the shift from being an employee to business owner overnight. And it does require a different way of thinking and certainly more self-reliance because, you know, they can no longer rely on a regular income or a boss to tell them what to do or somebody to bail them out when things go wrong. So in terms of kind of the shift in the mindset, it's very much about thinking about what skills do I need to learn, because they're very confident in what they do, but when it comes to actually business skills of maybe getting new clients, sales and marketing, setting up systems, dealing with the whole financial structure around businesses, that's where we can often see quite a dip in confidence. So it's not unusual for me to come across people who've maybe been out there for maybe 18 months, 2 years, and you know, they're not really working at their best or performing at their best because they're so concerned and so worried about you know, doing the right things and learning all of those new skills. And quite often I see this play out, particularly say in their pricing. So that's a typical one where actually they're undercharging because they think, well, I'm not very experienced in business, but actually what they're doing is forgetting that they may have 10, 15, 20 years experience in what they actually do.
It's funny, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she's just started working with billionaires. Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, and I was talking to her about it, and she was saying that, you know, that she'd had a mindset shift some time ago to be working with millionaires, but she was quite staggered at how much she still had to work on to make that shift up. And one of the ways she did it was to look at her value in terms of what she's learned, so experience, a skill set, you know, any product she's all, you know, in product in terms of the service packaging or whatever, and to look at what that's worth and suddenly start to realize your value, because people talk about your value and they're like, oh, I don't really understand that. But whatever services, they will have different offerings, I'm guessing. They will have the experience, they will have, I don't know, 20, 25 years, maybe less, maybe longer. It doesn't matter. They've had that experience, and we devalue it, don't we?
Yeah, so and very often, if I ask the question, well, how have you come to the conclusion about the pricing that you're setting? And there is no particular kind of model that they've used. It's more often that it's set on the value they put on themselves and their own self-worth at that particular time. And if it is that they're having this dip in confidence because they're busy trying to learn the new skills that they need to learn, then that can very much affect their pricing and think, oh, well, I'm only just starting out, so I'll keep it low and then I'll raise my prices. But actually, they need to base their prices based on the value they bring to the client and the return on investment that they bring to the client.
Yeah.
And that's quite a conundrum for many of them because of this confidence thing. So it's an interesting sort of paradox in many respects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking here on my own journey, but also some of the things that I'm hearing of late, is this idea that you can't do it all. And when you start out, you think I don't want to pay for somebody or can't afford to. I've got to keep the costs down, and you try to spread yourself so thinly, which doesn't help the confidence. But the mindset is, I can do it all.
Yes. Absolutely, because I mean, in many respects, they're going into it blind. Unless somebody has actually run a business before, or they have a trusted advisor, coach, mentor, whatever that might be, working alongside them, they are blind in many respects. And this again can really affect their confidence, because they think they should be able to do it, especially if they've come out as an expert employee and feeling very competent at quite a high level. Then it's a whole new world to them. It's a whole new language. It's a different way of working. And we are taught to be kind of self-reliant and just get on with it, which isn't really the best mindset in terms of running your own business.
Yeah.
The best thing people can do is actually focus on what they're good at and as quickly as possible bring in some expertise, and also surround themselves with people who have been in business a while, share those experiences, and also sort of taken some advice from some trusted advisors that have been there before.
I think that's really powerful there, Anne, and for the audience particularly, that when you're seeking advice, help, support, choose people who are where you want to be, because there are a lot of people who are talking a good talk but may not be quite where you want to be, and you just need to be choosing the right people to work with when you're moving forward. Easier said than done, because again, we're very often driven by price in those early days when we're trying to get things off the ground. So one of the things that I was particularly interested in is, okay, so the first stage is very much framed by confidence and trying to find their way, because it is a massive change. But obviously, as the business grows, what are the key shifts that could help business owners make life easier for themselves?
Yeah, again, great question here. So some of the real challenges that people face at this stage are, more around time, team, and money, because they've probably got to the stage where they've worked out how to make some money for themselves. And now it's a case of actually starting to kind of grow that business and realizing that actually you can't just be, a lone wolf. You've got to actually engage other people. And the other thing that I notice very much at this stage is that it's about building what I call resilience, or a resilient mindset, because you have to expect the unexpected. I mean, if we take the situation at the moment where we're heading into another recession, if you've not experienced that before, particularly as a business owner, that can be a very scary place to be. And the natural instinct is to kind of, batten down the hatches and kind of cut your costs. Now, I would always support people in saying you have to be very careful and you have to kind of be mindful of your costs. But actually, the best way out of this is to focus on growing your income and growing sales. So it's a bit of both. And the piece about resilience is there will be ebbs and flows in a business journey.
Yeah.
Every business owner has that. You have good days, you have not so good days. You go through periods where it can be quite lean, and building that resilience muscle is really important, and so that you can actually bounce back a bit quicker. And it's still dealing also with things like rejection, which is part of being in business. You're not going to win every proposal, you're not going to win every client. And it's important that you don't always take it personally, but you learn from that and you ask yourself the question, okay, that didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out. What is it I need to do differently next time?
Yeah, and I guess this is and I'm only guessing here, is that it's in that growth period where the mindset needs to shift, that people
Usually.
like yourself are really valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And if it's not a business coach, there are plenty of good people in the business network that can really be sort of a buddy or a mentor. And I think it's very important to listen to people who've actually been in business, and not necessarily your friend or your partner or whatever else, who still has that employee mindset, which is very different.
Yeah, I love the fact that you've said that. The employee mindset is very different,
Yeah,
because the entrepreneurial one, which is what you're basically stepping out to in this, is more risk taking than risk adverse, because the employee tends to be, wants
absolutely.
safety, the knowledge that things are the same, whereas you're right, there are the peaks and troughs, and being able to ride that wave, so to speak, is important.
Yes, absolutely. And as you say, making that shift to actually bringing more people into the team, and that can be a real challenge for people, particularly if they're, say, professional experts in their area of expertise, IT or whatever it might be. It might even be professional services. That's a real challenge for a lot of people, to have the courage and the confidence to actually delegate. That's one of the big real mind shifts that I kind of really work with my clients on, is really helping them make that kind of shift, so that the business doesn't become too reliant on them. That will certainly hold the business back.
Yes, absolutely. And potentially, bearing in mind my world, all about emotional mastery, is that it can lead to burnout as they try to do too much and be everything. I'm just listening to a book whose title escapes me at the moment, but I'll make sure it goes in the comments. And it's about recruiting virtual staff. And he talks in there about the fact that it was Chris Ducker who wrote it. And he was talking about the fact that he was doing everything in the business, and he was becoming a bottleneck because he didn't think anybody else could do it. And in the end, he sacked himself. I love the concept. A little bit of humor there. I mean, he didn't come out of the business, but he sacked his role so that he could step back and get other people to start to do the things that really he didn't need to be involved in. And he went from, extensive hours where he was in burnout. I mean, he had no choice, from what I understand, to a point where actually he could start to, recover, and the business still kept going. And that's really where we need to be, isn't it? It's
yeah, completely. And unless people actually get their head around that one and make that shift and come to terms with that they can't do it all themselves, they'll never really move on from being, say, a sole trader into what we would call a proper business that actually needs to be able to run without the key player, because otherwise there is no value in the business. Okay, too dependent. But the advice I usually give is to start to shift that mindset around thinking about your business as being a marathon, not a sprint. So in the early days, first 2 years, I've done it myself. You just work every hour there is, because it's exciting, it's challenging, all of those things, but it's not sustainable. And once people start to kind of eat into their weekends, working weekends and working evenings, they are heading for burnout. And that's when they don't make great decisions. They're not at their best. So it's a really false economy.
I love that statement. You're right. A lot of the people that I invited to this are accountants. Some of them will be employees, some will be working on their own, or potentially even running small businesses. And I think, they already are at risk of working long hours because of the nature of their work and the demands that happens. So to make it even more complicated with, trying to do it all, it's just not worth it. So that's really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's usually a sign if they are getting busy, they can become a bit dysfunctional, or the business can become a bit dysfunctional. And that's usually a sign that two things. One, they need more help. And B, that actually they might need to look at their business model and reconfigure the way that the business is working and how they're actually making money. Right. Because I have a saying, what gets you here won't get you there. So still using the same business model that they had when they started out may not be appropriate.
And I know from my own experience, I've had to shift and change things from when I first started. So
me too.
It comes with the territory. It's all part of the fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously, we've had the starter who's all about confidence and just having more ability to shift the mindset to running their own business, to the business is growing, so it's resilience, it's dealing with rejection, not taking things personally, delegation. Now we come to the more established businesses, and I know there will be a few out there that I may be following or may even tune into this. They're beginning to scale up. How could the mindset, and I'm guessing here this still is in the leadership team, the business owner, how could a mindset change benefit the business?
Yes, okay. Again, lovely question, great question. And this is where, when I'm talking about established businesses, you're going to have at least two, maybe even, a top team of directors. Okay. And many of those will have either been founders of that business or will come through the ranks. And it can be quite a challenge for them to make the mindset shift from being an employee, first of all, being starting out prior to the business, being an employee, to actually a business owner, then as maybe somebody who's really managing the operations, and manager to leader. So it's really manager to leader. So, and not being as hands-on, but actually somebody who can actually set the direction of the business, set the strategy, focus on that, do the planning, and actually engage the team, with their vision, and also through great communication. Now, again, these are skills that people may not have had previously. So that in itself is kind of quite telling. It's a personal development journey they need to go on as well, because unless they're able to make that shift, the business will suffer, and they'll be tempted to what I call meddle in the business. So being able to kind of hand off and develop the team is really important for that success of the business.
Yeah, I guess it's because it's at this point the business has almost become an entity in its own right. I mean, it is earlier, but it's become more so, so they're not able to control it, if that's the right word, in the same way that they did years ago. I used to work for a company called Motorola Telco. It was a subset of Motorola, a bigger organization. And when I joined, they were still growing, and it was amazing how quickly things shifted and changed. But when they became established, as they did 2 or 3 years after I joined, there was more processes and more specifics about the outcomes, and the management team were only really getting involved if there was problems. Otherwise, they were strategizing and driving the business forward, looking at sales and all that. So I remember going through something very similar, and the growing management team was always something to watch, I should say.
Yeah, very much so. And I think at that stage, the business does need to kind of engage external help and support for the bits that, they either haven't done previously, or they want to improve and do better. So, and I am seeing much more what you and I would know from corporate sort of executive coaching coming into the SME market. you know, on the slightly bigger companies, maybe, you know, with 25 plus employees, and working with the top team kind of coaching, development, those sorts of things can really, really help, along with trusted advisors, you know, from the financial world, whatever the business needs, and having a really great people plan. And the other key shift I'd like to just mention there, it's about developing their kind of tools and muscle for decision making, because decisions at that stage need to be based on what is best for the business, not necessarily what you've inherited along the way. So sometimes I see that the business might have, I liken to having a bus full of people. However, some of those are not sitting in the right seats for the business, and others probably don't need to be on the bus. Yeah,
good point.
that can be a challenging one. And if things aren't working, you know, with certain individuals, it's probably not working for the business, and it's not working for the individual.
No, I think that's the key, isn't it? Because if it was working, they'd be in there and away. So you're doing them in some cases a favour, aren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And they're very tough decisions to make, because, you know, at that stage, you know, the business owners will be very emotionally attached still to the business. So making that shift from, you know, they've been their baby to actually something that is, as you alluded to earlier, that is more of an entity in itself, and creating value in the business, and not making sure that the business is not too dependent on them as well, is really important. I certainly see this quite a lot when I work with man and wife teams, that there's a huge emotional connection with the business, and that's understandable. But if at any stage that they want to actually exit that business, or do a management buyout, whatever it might be, disconnecting them from the business can be a real challenge.
Right, okay, I hear you. So do you have any advice for business owners on what they could do to develop the winning mindset for where they are, but also for where they're going? So they're preparing immediately for the next stage, which is where I'm at the moment.
Yes, and I think there are a couple of things I'd like to share here. You know, the reality is that running your own business can be a very lonely place at times. It can be quite isolating, and particularly more and more when we're doing sort of remote working. And there are all sorts of ups and downs, you know, day to day, week by week, and whatever else. And I think to really help and support your, not only your mental health, but your winning mindset, I think it's very important that people stay connected to other people. And what I mean by that is that, you know, not trying to be the Lone Ranger, but actually staying connected through groups like this. You know, being with other business owners, having those trusted advisors, maybe even engaging, you know, a business coach or a mentor that can really kind of work with them, and work through some of these challenges with them, so that they can stay at their best, is really important.
Yeah. Do you have I mean, you've already mentioned husband and wife teams, but do you have any you know, examples that you can give of somebody who's made that shift, how they went about it? I mean, and I'm putting you on the spot a bit really now, but
no, that's a really good question as well, and it really ties in with my other point that I want to make. Look, you know, there are various different ways that people can do this, and I've seen people do this. So those that find it easier to make the shift are people who have from day one invested in their business education. Okay, now there's lots of different ways you can do this. There's lots of books out there. I mean, running a business and the complexities of it, and the process for doing it hasn't changed for hundreds of years. It's just about being able to apply some of that theory to your business. So certainly, you know, podcasts, books, those sorts of things, being part of business networks are really good ways of actually making that transition. And also the people that I've seen sort of, you know, make that shift kind of successfully, they have kind of committed to that ongoing learning and worked with a mentor or a coach that actually has done it before, in terms of kind of helping them navigate all of the ups and downs that a business brings.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, so I think from my own perspective, I talk about being a mindset coach, but I'm more interested in the challenges that they're facing to get where they need. Whereas I know from your perspective, you're about leading them forward into the future. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, well, giving them the practical tools, because and it was one of the reasons that when I left corporate and I moved into the SME market, I was really quite shocked at the lack of good practical business advice that was out there. And so I have developed, obviously, tools for no matter what stage the business is at. And particularly in the SME market, they haven't got an awful lot of time to almost think. And when a situation comes up, what they want is some practical advice. And mine, it's more focused on that, as opposed to, the great work that you're doing and helping them kind of making those mental and emotional mindset shifts.
Yeah.
So I think they're very complementary, but mine is much more operational. So if it's about pricing, or it's about sales, or it's about systems, then I'm here to kind of help and support them in getting those implemented into the business.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Growing the bottom line very quickly.
It's when we were talking, I think that's where I honed in on. So can I just ask then, do you just work with on one-to-one, or do you've talked about going in to talk to teams? You do that, the leaders of the business?
Yeah,
management?
absolutely. So obviously we've got a mix of kind of ways that we can work with clients. So it's myself and a team that I've got. So we do some one-to-one work. We also do group work, depending on what the program is. So we've got a program running at the moment that's really about growing the business and growing the sales and the clients through a referral program, which is very appropriate for service-based businesses. Then as the business gets a bit bigger, then we'll do some work with the top teams. So that might be what we would know is executive coaching, but we call it top team development. So we'll do some one-to-one work, but also we'll work strategically with those businesses on where the business is going, setting out the plan, bringing in experts around us as well. So that might be our accountants, our lawyers, HR people. We're well placed to kind of see where the opportunities are and what the business needs.
So interestingly then, one of the things that I'm talking to people about is the mindset of where the next 6 months will be, and I'm getting a generalistic flavor that people are worried and concerned, obviously around the recession, but all the other things that come with that, the rising prices and the challenges that are being faced generally, I think, in personal life. How are you seeing those mindsets heading, and what can we do to help ourselves, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it goes back to some things I was talking earlier. I think those that are still relatively new into business, it's a scarcity mindset that I'm seeing. That we can't afford to do this. We've got to kind of batten down the hatches. Actually, those that have been around a little bit longer and maybe been through a recession before, they know that actually the only way out of it is actually to grow their way out of it. And this is the time now to invest in things like marketing, developing your sales skills, developing your resilience, working on your mindset, all of those great things that a lot of those you can help them with. So we need to encourage people to actually look at success stories in business in these, because there are always opportunities no matter what happens. Look at COVID, great example. Yes, there were no doubt that there were some sectors that were hit very badly, but lots of businesses were able to pivot. and there were lots that were really kind of able to grow very quickly. So it's about, helping people get a balanced view on these things.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and it's just what I think some of my audience will probably want to hear, because from certainly during COVID, so many accountants were already heading towards the making tax digital and online opportunities that are going on, so that those who were going that way and more customer or client focused were doing really, really well. So I think they worked really hard for it as well, because I don't know whether you remember, but they kept shifting and changing things at government level, and it's like,
Absolutely.
what
Yeah.
Oh, in fact, we've just been through that as well, haven't we? What's today's plan?
Yeah, no, they're just like, we've been through a pandemic. I mean, how much worse can it get? I mean, and this comes back to that resilience and being able to work with what's thrown at you at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And accepting that is normal in the business world.
And I think, just to bring this to a close, Anne, you've been amazing. Thank you so much, and for tolerating my incompetence with cancelling the event anyway. Don't know how to, but thank you. But I think one of the things that for me is important here is the fact that our mindset can become fixed and our worst enemy. So the best course of action, what I'm hearing here, going through the different business stages, is to be open to new ways of being.
Absolutely. Every day is a new day, particularly in business.
So I'm going to put your email in the comments, but just for those who are just listening here, how can people contact you if they want to talk to you?
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Kim, for that. Obviously, LinkedIn is always a great place. Jump in, connect up, and let's have a chat. See where we can help and support each other. Obviously, email and through the website as well.
Okay, and I will make sure they're in there. They were in StreamYard, but obviously that's not working, so that's gone.
No
You've been a star. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Clarifying that for me, because I have learnt, well, because that's what happened, probably since talking to you, and that's just taken a while to settle, is that my mindset needs to shift. And so that's an interesting one for me. So it was really useful to hear the different layers. I am clearly not in the established or beyond. Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. And when I say, look, just go and find somebody who's just 1 or 2 steps ahead of you.
Yes.
Not too far, because that can be a bit overwhelming. And if they've been successful, you should say, use them as your guide.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for listening, everyone. And I will get better at this.
You're great. It's fine. All right, Kim. Thanks.